MMA is definitely not a sport for the lighthearted. If you must excel in this sport, you must be strong and ready to get up each time you hit the floor. And trust me, in this sport, you will hit the floor a lot. Although very different from street fights due to how brutal MMA is, it is often compared to street fights. Although the average person thinks that it is a sport with very few rules. As rough as MMA might seem, it has lots of subtle rules. If you are not a fighter or a real fan, you might have no idea these rules even exist. In MMA as we have it today, you cannot elbow at certain angles. Also, moves that have health implications are a no-no. So why does the average person think MMA is associated with very few rules? Well, back in the days, this combat sport did not have as many rules as it has today. However, various movements in different fights brought about the introduction of some rules. In the absence of these movements, these rules wouldn't have existed. Well, we have to give kudos to these movements as they changed MMA forever. In this video, we are looking at the 10 precise movements that forever changed MMA rules. Before we go on, please click the like button and hit the bell button to avoid missing out on other videos. Starting at number 10. Number 10. Short pulling. In modern-day MMA, there are rules to dressing. Beyond dressing decently, some clothes are considered inappropriate for a fight in the octagon, as they are easy to pull. Before the fight between Mikey Burnett and Pat Miletich in 1998 for the welterweight title, bigger shorts were okay. However, in this fight, it appeared all the fighters did was pull each other's shorts. It was quite a boring fight. Pulling each other's shorts exposed the fighters' bodies in ways that the fans should never have seen. After this fight, it became illegal to pull a fellow fighter's shorts during a fight. Number 9. Vaseline scandal. It's not out of place to see a fighter's team member applying some substance to their faces before a fight and after each round. Not many people know what this jelly-like substance is. Well, what gets applied to the faces of these fighters is Vaseline. If you're wondering what this does, think no more. When applied to the face, the direct impact of punches to the face are significantly reduced. This is one reason MMA officials do not have to stop a fight because someone is badly cut. In the absence of this action, officials might have to halt fights severally to treat badly injured fighters. There was no issue with applying Vaseline on a fighter's body before UFC 94. However, at UFC 94, George's Corner went beyond his face and applied Vaseline to his chest and back. It is common knowledge that Vaseline reduces friction, so when applied to the body, it becomes difficult for a fighter to be wrestled down, and this sometimes gives a fighter an unfair advantage. It remains unknown if they applied Vaseline to his body in an attempt to make it difficult for his opponents to fight him, or they simply did it innocently. Due to how difficult it was for BJ Penn to fight his opponent, he complained bitterly. The case was looked into, and a rule was made. This rule only gives independent courtmen the power to apply Vaseline to a fighter's face. Members of a fighter's camp are not allowed to apply Vaseline. Number 8. No more tiny shorts. Back in the days, MMA fighters were free to put on whatever they wanted, until someone took things a little too far. This was a moment in UFC 133, and Dennis Holman for some reason decided to put on very small underwear. He was actually dressed worse than a ring girl. His opponent was not free from undue attention too, as he had an arrow-shaped tattoo on his chest. However, on this fight night, what really caught everyone's attention was Holman's tiny blue trunks. As much as there were no rules, this looked very inappropriate, and Holman explained that he dressed that way after losing a bet. Holman lost the fight. However, his victory was not the topic of the discussion after the fight. Rather, his dressing was. Dana White was disgusted with his pair of trunks, and at that moment, it became a rule to put something more decent on in a UFC fight. Number 7. 12-6 elbows. Before IFC Battleground 2 in 2006, MMA fighters were free to hit at whatever angle they wanted to. However, after a fight between Brad Gabriel and Gan McGee, it became illegal to elbow higher straight up or straight down. In this encounter, the 6'10" McGee kept hitting his opponent with straight down elbows. Things didn't look good during this fight. After this fight, one of the officials involved in treating Gabriel wanted all elbow hits banned. However, in the end, they decided to do away with just 12-6 downward elbows. Number 6. The introduction of judges. In UFC 7, Oleg Taktarov met Ken Shamrock. Ken was defending his title. In this fight, for some reasons, the fighters decided to play it safe, so it was quite an inactive match. The match ended in a draw. So, the ultimate aim of fixing the fight was not met. At this point, UFC introduced judges. So, at the end of rounds, even if both fighters seemed equal, the judges can decide who fought better. Number 5. The end of groin shots. In 1997, the IVC had their first event. This drew inspiration from the UFC, and they had rules. However, there was no rule about groin shots. In this fight, Octavio Pedro went head-to-head with Gray Big Daddy Goodridge, who just couldn't stop hitting him below the belt. At some point, Big Daddy even had his foot tucked into Octavio's groin. Pedro was super uncomfortable and just could not be effective in his bout. Big Daddy won his match. There were other matches in which fighters hit their opponents in the groin. However, the fight between Big Daddy and Octavio played a major role in ending this type of shot. Number 4. Flipping an opponent over the cage. MMA fighters are usually very physically fit. This is common knowledge, and some of them have the strength to flip a fellow fighter over the fence in a fight. When Abbott reigned as an MMA fighter, there were limited rules. So, he stuck to his guts while fighting. When his guts told him to throw a fighter over the fence, he did not hesitate. This was a fight in Ultimate in 1996, and in this fight, he had to deal with Cal Worsham. As soon as it was time for the fighters to knuckle up, Abbott only thought about throwing his opponent over the fence. So, he picked him up and attempted throwing him over. As much as this attempt was unsuccessful, it would have been a bad scene to see a fighter hit the hard floor outside the octagon. After this fight, it became illegal for any fighter to attempt throwing their opponent over the fence. Number 3. The introduction of TKOs. Before TKOs became a thing in MMA, the only ways to end a fight were through submission, the towel being thrown in by a fighter's camp, or by knockouts. This seemed great. However, it was not good for the fighters. They needed to be protected. In a fight between Gerard Gordeau and a sumo wrestler, Taylor, Gerard hit the sumo fighter and his tooth fell out. Although the fighter could continue, the referee ended the fight. This decision did not go down well with the UFC founder. So, he told his friend Big John McCarthy to officiate from that time. Big John stepped up to the responsibility of officiating. However, in UFC 2, Pat Smith beat his opponent until he was tired. Big John could not go on with this. He insisted that the fighters had to be protected, and this birthed TKOs. Number 2. Referees gained the power to separate fighters. One of the ways to take out fighters in MMA is to force them into submission. So, some fighters focus on escaping submission, while others focus on developing great submission moves. Ken Shamrock and Boyce Gracie met in UFC 1. After this, they went their separate ways and gained fame and success. Much later, they had a rematch. At this point, Gracie had a great submission move, and it was interesting to see how Ken was going to cope against this move. This match came and Gracie tried getting Ken to submit. For a moment, it seemed like this move was working, until Ken decided against making a move. If he had made a move, he could have been roped in further. So, he lay there, inactive. After about 30 minutes of inactivity, the referee decided to call this fight a draw. The fans didn't get what they wanted, so the rule of referees breaking fights was born. Number 1. Dehydration test. Lots of MMA fighters go through a weight reduction procedure before fighting. This process is difficult. However, they are able to achieve it by losing water. As much as this weight loss process works, it is dangerous, and it cost a fighter his life. Chinese fighter Yang Jianbing lost his life in 2015 because of his attempt at weight loss. After this, the dehydration test was introduced, and it has remained a part of MMA ever since. Should MMA introduce more rules, or are the current rules enough? Let us know what you think in the comment section below.